And I'm joined now by Watford's Member of Parliament, Dean Russell. Friend of the show, Dean Russell. Dean, welcome along. How have you been?
I'm good, Miles. Great, and congratulations on your recent successful award.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I've been nominated for a Community Radio Award for Best Entertainment Show. Obviously, there weren't very good entries this year.
I'm sure they were exemplary, and you were at the top of the list, no doubt.
Oh, I hope we've got to win it first, and we'll see how we go. Let's start off by, we're going to talk about COVID in a second, but I want to start off with something slightly different to get into this. You stood up in Parliament yesterday and spoke about International Men's Day and mental health just in general, and about people saying it's people speaking about what's going on and helping your friends through some of the problems that they might have at the moment and just generally in life. Is this something that you think is important to be highlighted in Parliament more often, and for people for there to be more government policy on it almost?
Well, yeah, I mean, since the start of the election, actually, so from last year, I made mental health one of my top priorities, so I've been really pleased that this year, and it might have been even since the last time I spoke to you, one of my pledges was to get 1,000 mental health first aiders trained across Watford, and since over the past few months, we've been able to get the Prime Minister here to launch that. Camelot very kindly sponsored us to get that programme in place, and I'm working with the Chamber of Commerce in Watford and other groups to get that all moving. So that I'm really excited about that, because I think mental health and awareness is so important. And the reason why I talk about it a lot, especially as I did yesterday in talking about the very, very sad truth of high rates of male suicide compared to women, and any suicide's awful, but it's 3/4 of men who commit suicide, and I think the stats are something like 800,000 people a year globally commit suicide, and so for me, I think the main thing is breaking down the stigma, and getting people to know that it's not a weakness, to ask for help. And my point yesterday really was, if anyone wants to watch the speech, they can check it out on my Facebook page or on my website. But my point really was that, give it a bit more time, give it another few minutes, another hour, another day, because you don't quite know, why you might really be, what your purpose is in life, what you're here for. And actually, if you give it a bit more time, perhaps you might find that. And I think it's so important that people ask for help, get support, and that's why I've done the first aid programme. But because I'm on the Health and Social Care Select Committee, I've been very fortunate to be able to really push it on that side as well. So earlier in the year, I asked Claire Murdoch, who's the head of mental health of the NHS, if she would make sure that families of NHS workers, for example, also get guidance or at least advice in terms of where to go to for support. And a few weeks ago, she shared on the Select Committee that there's a £15 million winter fund for NHS workers, which also will include at least guidance and information for their families as well. So excellent. I've been trying to do my bit for Watford and for the country, really, wherever I can.
Now, going into your role on the Health and Social Care Select Committee, COVID. I'm ready for COVID to go away now, but it is still here. We're in this second lockdown. It's been described by some people as lockdown light, almost, as a sort of a nickname for it, because it hasn't felt the same as the first time. Do you think that people have been adhering to the guidelines strictly enough this time round?
I think it's... the first thing I would say is to those who are, thank you. My take, and again I've spoken about this in Parliament, is that the challenge with COVID is that you don't see it. You don't see the repercussions of your positive or your negative actions. And for somebody who wears a mask and makes sure that they're wearing that in a queue or when they're out or follows the guidance, they don't know that they might have helped a grandparent see their grandchildren next week because they're not unwell, or they don't know that actually by socially distancing they didn't pass on COVID and therefore somebody can go to work tomorrow. And I think the challenge is, I think people have got fatigue. I get it's been a tough year, it really has, and I really have sympathy for everyone because it's really been hard. But if we don't follow that guidance, if people don't wear the masks and make those small sacrifices on a daily basis of the distancing and all of the other things, the washing the hands, then actually the risk of spreading it increases. And that means that the risks of lockdowns, the risks of everything else come into play. And so the huge part is making sure that we're not using critical care beds in hospitals so that non-COVID things can get looked at, because that's the main push really at the moment. Is one is to stop people getting COVID, because that's an awful thing to have, but also it's to make sure that hospitals can carry on as normal for the non-COVID stuff. And so so rather than focusing on those who aren't, because I know I am aware people aren't perhaps doing it as much, I just really want to say thank you to those who are, because if there's a choice of wearing a mask or not today, please wear one, because you never know the repercussions of your actions that might really change someone's life and perhaps stop them getting long COVID, or being able to go to work, or helping us get this R rate down and getting us back to normal quicker than we would have done.
Absolutely. And do you think we're on course in Watford to have lockdown restrictions eased on the 2nd of December, like was the original plan?
I'm hopeful, but we've all got to play our part. I do myself as well, as much as I can, even in Parliament, where it seems quite empty at times because there's no staff and the restrictions are there. But even there, I walk around with my mask on as much as possible. I think where we're at the moment is that we're 2 weeks into the second lockdown, and so we haven't yet got those numbers to show whether we're plateauing or going down. But I'm feeling confident that once we get the figures in the next week or two, we will have a much clearer view of it.
Well, just quickly, if that's the case, Dean, with not really knowing if we're plateauing with the numbers at the moment, we're seeing rumours of whether we may be allowed out at Christmas. And I've heard Oliver Dowden's been talking about the potential for sports stadia to have some fans in again by the end of the year. If we don't know these numbers now, do you feel like that's dangling a carrot in front of people that's going to make them more angry if that eventually can't be the case and it's taken away? Should they maybe just be saying, look, we don't know what's going to happen for the rest of this year, we're not going to say anything on the subject of fans? But I know people want to see fans back in stadium. Of course they do. I would love to be back in a football ground full of people cheering on my team, but I also don't want that false hope.
I totally understand. I mean, I think the thing is, it's about looking at what we can do and what's possible in terms of planning. So the big difference is that this time round we've got the tests coming through. So we've got the initial rollout in Hertfordshire of the 10,000 what are called lateral flow tests, which are the much quicker turnaround tests, which means that we can start to look at things in a slightly different view. I think my take is cautious optimism. The vaccination announcements is very positive, but the vaccination hasn't yet been signed off for the public, but I think we're edging closer to that, which would be amazing news. So I think it's not so much dangling a carrot, and I understand totally where you're coming from. My view is that I think cautious optimism is there. We need some lights at the end of the tunnel, because 2020 has been a very dark, long tunnel. But I think as we look into 2021, the hope is there that all the things that we needed. If you look at tests, for example, at the start of the year, there was no such thing as a test for COVID, whereas now I believe there's something like 37 million tests have been carried out. So I think, the infrastructure's in a much better place now, and people are following the rules, although, as you say, there are those who aren't, and I beg them to do that. So I think, that cautious optimism is important. We've had the lockdown for 2 weeks. There are signs nationally about what that looks like, which I think are looking positive. But for Watford, the situation we were in, which was a difficult one, was that pre this second lockdown, we were heading numbers-wise towards Tier 2. So the chances for Watford, we're not going to be... I'd be very, very surprised if we were to go into Tier 3 restrictions. Yeah. But we may come out hopefully into Tier 1, and I have very, very regular conversations with all the key players, including the Director of Public Health. There is a risk we might go into Tier 2.
Is it harder for us in Watford just because of our proximity to London as well, because we're so close to one of the most densely populated, busiest cities in the world?
Well, it's interesting, actually, because one of the things that I was really pleased about during the year is that actually our numbers weren't as bad as some other areas like London, and I think the community in Watford have been phenomenal in terms of following the rules as well, and especially during that first lockdown and over the summer. So there is definitely a challenge of that. We're a very urban area. We've got an incredible suburban area. Sorry, we're high density. I say to colleagues, for Watford, if you look at the size of it geographically, I think we're the second smallest geographically sized constituency outside of London. So we are more packed in together, and that is going to create risks. But the fact that throughout the first half of the year we managed to not go into, the first half of the year meant that we managed to do as well as we did, and then over the summer to then not go into a tier 2 or tier 3 pre this lockdown, I think just shows how well everybody has really tried to follow the guidance, and we've just got to continue to do that, really.
Do you want to quickly ask you about the vaccination before we finish as well? Yep. You mentioned the vaccine earlier about it not being signed off yet, but there being positive signs. Now, I've spoken to a few people about their opinion on getting vaccinated, and this isn't an anti-vaxxer perspective by any means. It's about the fact that it's a vaccine that's been developed in a relatively short space of time, when other vaccines have taken a decade to develop. Is it looking like it's going to be something that may be compulsory for people to take, or is it just going to be a case of we have the vaccine available, so there's no, if you're in a vulnerable area or if you're a vulnerable person, you should be taking it, and then life can get back to normal, a bit like the flu, where if people haven't taken it, they might just be at risk of getting it?
Brilliant question, and one of the benefits of being on the Health and Social Care Select Committee and on the Joint Committee for Human Rights actually is that I get to ask similar questions to the top guys, and I actually asked that question, I'm pretty confident, a few weeks ago around would it be compulsory, and the answer that I got at the time was no. I can't see it being compulsory. I think that the key thing at the moment, I can't, I've got no crystal ball, but I can't see that being the case, and I've not had any conversations on that front at all. I think the thing I'd say to people is this, that for any sort of drug or anything that has gone through clinical trials, and I've done quite a lot of work in that space previously in my professional life, and actually, the volume of people that have done the trial for this globally has been so much higher than you would normally get. The focus of the attention of the companies that are doing these trials and who are doing the safety checks and all those things are exactly as rigorous as has been for everything else, any other drug that you would take, but actually probably more so, because actually, the eyes of the world are on this. So I would say from a safety perspective, there's no chance in my mind that that something would be put out that wasn't safe enough to take. The main goal here, and we've had these conversations, anyone who's genuinely interested in the detail of it, again on my website, they'll feel free to watch the videos of the Select Committee clips that I've asked questions on, but also online for the full videos. I think it's on Parliament Live TV or parliamenttv.live. And what I would say is that the rigour behind the safety checks on this is incredible. And so as and when the hope is that this gets launched nationally, there's no reason not to take it. And I think if you're vulnerable, if you're a frontline worker, it's going to really make a massive difference. But it's not, there's no silver bullet to this. It's not like a war where one day we'll wake up and suddenly COVID will be gone. There is an element of living with it, but I think the vaccinations and the testing will make a massive difference. And to be honest, it's funny because as an MP, I would be gladly first in the queue to take the vaccination. But as Jonathan Van Tam has said, we've got to make sure that our mums, as he put it, or as he said, our mums need to be first. So whilst I would gladly do it from a safity perspective,
the most vulnerable need to take it first. I understand absolutely. That. But if you'd have said you weren't, you wouldn't be willing to take it, I think that would be a bit of a red flag.
Hold
on a minute. Hey, thank thank you so much for joining us today. As always, it's a pleasure to talk to you. I think we're going to hopefully be catching up again in a couple of weeks, maybe over Zoom this time. It'll be the first time I've been able to actually look into your eyes as we speak to each other. We've never spoken face to face, so to speak.
I'd love to, and if you want to do it regularly again, I know we did earlier in the year, very happy to do that. It's always a joy.
Of course, thank you very much. Hopefully we can be out of this lockdown soon. Watford's Member of Parliament, Dean Russell, speaking to the show this morning on Vibe Breakfast. We've still got loads of tunes left to play. Marshmello and Demi Lovato on the way. We're going to have Dua Lipa and DaBaby with Levitating as well. And we'll get another sports bite with Danielle.